Hello, I'm Loren Sederstrom. I'm the host of the All Around Grant Show. Today, we're going to be talking about the city of Grant and also about some school district issues in Mahtomedi. I'm working today with Diana Longrie, my co-host, and we'll be talking about a number of things. Well, first, I guess we're going to start out with the city of Grant, and we have a council member by the name of John Raj, and he's only made about 5 out of the first 11 meetings in the city of Grant. So he's kind of absent a lot. But let's play the first clip and we'll talk on the other side.
Agenda, entertain motions on that.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor of the regular agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Well, there's new seating on that, and that's interesting that he finally is saying something. As I watch through this whole program, they reorganized everything, and they're setting up the 2 new members to make all these motions, and they evidently were instructed ahead of time, do I have a motion for this? And then one of them jumps in right away, so it's kind of interesting.
So you mean it's all choreographed before the meeting starts?
Yeah. Well,
if it's choreographed to 3 out of the 5, that would be a violation of the open meeting law.
Well, we're fighting with that in a district court right now. It's been appealed, it's been sent back because they've made multiple mistakes. But we'll talk about that later, perhaps at another show when we're more into it, to show how bad, isn't it 3 strikes and you're out? But I guess not in the court system. Okay, now we're going to go on to the next part of the agenda where they're talking about a conditional use permit. And this is kind of interesting, and we'll comment on the other side.
Brad Reefstick. Mr. Reefstick is not here this evening as he has no action items, saving the city some money. Our city planner, Jennifer Haskamp, is next, and I'm going to let her take it from here. Jennifer?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, so I'm not exactly sure how to handle this because the applicant that is requesting the conditional use permit for agenda item 1 under my report is not here at the moment. So I did communicate with her. She is sick and is also having some other personal issues going on tonight.
Okay.
And she was going to do her best to be here, but she's not made it yet. So I'm wondering if perhaps it makes sense to go to agenda item 2 and see if we get a response back from her as to whether or not she'll make it or not, or how you'd like to handle it.
Very good. Kim, is that, how would you handle that? Can we move that to 2 with a motion and a second on that, or can we just council prerogative to go to the second?
You can just move to the second.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. This is a 9 or 10 acre piece of property, and this is the story behind it, or so I'm told. The lady married a guy, and he is now adiosed, and the kids have grown, and she's got this horse farm, an old house that's been remodeled nicely, and a horse farm that people have complained about. Now she wants a conditional use permit to put 16 horses, and it's fraught with all kinds of problems.
Did it end up that they did something with this conditional use
No, what they
permit?
did is they tabled it. The interesting thing about Grant is if you have 5 acres, it's 2 acres per horse, so technically you can only have like 3 horses on 10 acres because you have to hold 2 or 3 acres out for the homestead. Well, this has a great big barn and indoor arena, and they want to put 16 horses on there. Not that you can't do that, but I just found it very interesting, and they did table it.
Did they address anything about whether or not if they were within
They
a certain
did
time
talk about
frame?
it was within the 60 days. If they go next time, it'll still be within the 60 days, so they hopefully have a meeting, and this lady can get it up or down one way or another. It's really interesting how after the big fight with Larry Lanou and trying to nail him down in the fiasco they were through when they tried to actually throw him and his wife in jail, because he didn't have a conditional use permit because he was grandfathered in. He came out in '82 before they changed the rules in '83, so by law he should have been, but they got him.
Because they were claiming that he had too many horses without a conditional use permit, correct?
That's right. And so then they went in front of the kangaroo court, and they made him, well, you changed your operation because he put up a bigger barn, so therefore you need a conditional use permit. Well, wait a minute. If you're doing X number of horses and then you change the barn, that makes no difference. But that's the politics of Grant, which is very bitter and divisive. Now let's go to the second thing that they're talking about on this, and this is you're gonna find this hilarious, but we'll play the next one, we'll talk on the other side.
As I'm sure you noticed when you took a look at your packets this evening, but I did think for those that are here, it would be beneficial to at least give a brief overview of what you're looking at. The two properties are actually non-contiguous, but part of an original plat back from the 1960s. And when that subdivision occurred, there was actually a private roadway that was created, or a cartway, it was actually a cartway standard, to access 3 of the lots that were subdivided at the time. So the subject really of this application is really that cartway portion, the 33-foot, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So it's pretty easy, but it is a little bit tricky from the standpoint of a lot of what happened prior to the ordinance being adopted. So that's why some of this is not totally consistent with what our current ordinance says. So the zoning of the properties this evening are A2. The subject area that is being proposed to transfer is approximately 42,900 square feet, or just shy of an acre. The proposed rearrangement results in that 1 acre being transferred from 77812 to 7995. And so the resulting parcel sizes are 7995 is 5.5 acres, so currently it is 4.5 acres. And 7781 is 25.3, so it loses an acre, but obviously but stays above the 20 acres, which is important for some of the accessory buildings, et cetera. So,
There we go.
So now, Lauren, it looks like, explain to our audience what they're doing here exactly, because from listening to this, it sounds like they are making sure that each parcel is the correct size.
Well, that's what they're doing. What happened is somebody bought a small parcel behind and built a house on it, and there were 3 other parcels laid out, but they didn't build on the other parcels before the ordinances changed. And what they're going to do is, there was a dedicated roadway, so now what they're doing in this, and we didn't watch the whole clip because it's long and boring, but they're going to put that easement to the last lot, but make it a public easement so other people can use it. But there's only one little 5-acre lot in back, or 4.5 acres, but we have a 5-acre minimum now. So this will put it within the 5-acre minimum, number one, and give access, legal access to it. And number 2, it'll give access to all the lots. And number 3, by going from 4.5 to over 5 acres, it allows them to have larger outbuildings. So if they, instead of having a 2,000-foot square barn, they can now have a 2,500 square foot barn, and that's essentially what they're doing for larger building space. Now these other 3 5-acre lots, or whatever it is, can't be built on. It's because it's 20 acres. You have 2 building sites. That's the way it is. So the other lots are going to have to stay vacant and attached to the other property, but one person will have a 5-acre lot and the other person will have 20 acre, or 15, 18, 20 acres. So that's how that works.
Right, so the parcel that would be of the 3 lots that bring up to the 23 acres or whatever it is, they could build a house on that. They just can't split it up anymore.
Yeah, they can't split anymore. There's 2 houses there. The one lot that's built on was the far one way in the back.
Okay.
So they needed an access, and there was kind of an access, but now it's going to be put into the deed, so there's a legal guideline and there's access for everybody, and no one can say, well, we gave you an easement, we don't want to do that anymore because we're mad at you. Now it's a legal easement, they can't challenge it. And that's the significance, plus the lot size allowing larger buildings. Let's go to the next one, and we'll talk on the other side.
We lost a council member. He moved away. Didn't really lose him. He moved out of Grant, so we've lost him. And next, of course, in January, we'll be appointing someone to take his place, so we'll have a full council up here as well. So it probably makes sense to follow Jennifer's recommendation and table. Any discussion on this, gentlemen? I believe a tabling request needs to come without discussion. So if I have a motion to table, that'd be great.
Move to table.
Very good. Do I have a second to table?
Second.
All those in favor of tabling until our January meeting, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And all those opposed. Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to go ahead and table that, as explained, until our January meeting, which is January 7th. January 7th.
Well, there are a couple of interesting things things going on in that clip there, Mr. Sederstrom. One is that the camera person at the meeting looked like they fell asleep and forgot that they were supposed to point the camera back at the council. And so we got to see that the planner was busy looking at her phone while the council is busy talking about their business. But then explain to us, though, we were hearing in the audio part the mayor speaking about this vacancy. Explain to us
Denny
what's
Kopp,
going on with this.
who was elected, 3 years ago with the mayor, deputy mayor, and Dennis Kopp was elected. He is moving out of town, and he's selling his house, so therefore there's a vacancy, and they're going to appoint someone. I have put my name in the hat for that, but I have about a greater chance of being reappointed to the city council as a snowball would in a pizza oven. So, but it is going to be interesting, and of course next fall there'll be an election. We're going to see what happens with that. Let's then go to the next clip, and this is going to be interesting too, so we'll talk on the other side.
2019 City Council meeting minutes. Mr. Rogg, Councilman Rogg to my right, was not here, so we need to go ahead and approve those minutes. So if I can get someone to move to approve our minutes from November, that would be great.
Motion to approve.
And do I have a second? Thanks, Tom. All those in favor of approving those minutes signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
Raj has missed, like I said, 5 out of 11 meetings. They changed the seating around in January, and we have another clip on that too.
So did he miss the November meeting?
Yes, he missed the November. He's missed several meetings.
So when they voted to approve the minutes of the meeting, then he should have abstained.
That's right. I don't know if he did or not. Who knows?
I did hear that he did. It sounded like eyes all.
Yep, that's what it did to me. Now we're going to talk about final budget. That's kind of interesting because this brings a whole can of worms in, because they just had a big brouhaha. We've talked on several of the other shows about how they were supposed to redo the streets, and that got voted down when the people finally figured out that they were doing a complete rebuild, and they were just getting a little overlay, and they were going to heavily subsidize the rebuilding of Joliet, where the mayor and the deputy mayor live. So that went up in smoke, and that all is on hold now. You know, they tried to put one over, and people got aware of it. I guess hopefully, partially, I helped the program along a little bit, making them aware of what the city council was doing. So let's go on. We'll talk about the final budget on the other side of this clip.
Tonight to approve our final levy for next year and our budget for next year. Are there any questions from the council?
Nothing's changed.
Nothing has changed. We set this budget in September and have reviewed our year-to-date expenses and our challenges we believe are coming for next year, and have not changed our budget or levy because of them. And so, but I would note that there was an article in the local Pioneer Press dated 11/18, and it said that cities cumulatively have a 7.5% increase in taxes, where Grant has always tried to be conservative and reasonable, and our levy increase this year will be 4% again. And the property tax average would be a 6% hike. That the property tax is made up of county taxes, city taxes, watershed taxes, some state taxes are in there, and mostly your school district taxes. So we have a small portion of your tax dollars, and we try to do our very best to spend them wisely. And so then our agenda item is for the 24th for the final budget. And if there are no questions or comments, I believe yes.
I just think we ought to try harder next year to get up to the 7%. Like, I just don't, I feel, you know, I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, it's interesting Tom says that. We had at 6 o'clock, we had our Truth and Taxation meeting, where residents, any resident can come and tell us to lower the taxes, raise their taxes, give us more services, give us less services. Once again, the building was empty. I've been sitting up here for, we had one person, but he didn't have anything to say about taxes, so I'm gonna call it empty. We are incredibly efficient here. Our last census showed we have 4,106 residents. Hopefully that will be over 5,000 in our next census.
The whole thing is the roads are deteriorating rapidly. And we should be fixing the roads. But the road policy dates back to horse and buggy. If you want the roads fixed, you pay for it. So that's what's happening with that. We had a road fund a number of years ago when Carr became mayor. He obliterated that, lowered the taxes for 2 years. And there are roads that are 30 years old that are falling apart that we should be doing something with. But again, we're back in the horse and buggy days, and the people are finally getting into an uproar about it. We'll see what happens with the next election. Okay, we have another short clip, and they're talking about service levels within the community, and I find this rather hollow, but we'll talk on the other side.
Level of services that you have, if people are inclined to not be happy with that level of service, the time to come is during your August budget meetings where you discuss the preliminary budget and talk about those numbers for the following year.
That is a great point. The truth in taxation that I mentioned tonight is actually the formal part of where the residents can come up and talk about this. But what our clerk has clearly pointed out here is if you show up here in August, when we're actually doing our budget numbers, you can sit right there and say, your budget, you should put more here, you should put more, you should raise more taxes here and there. That's where you can actually be part of the process. Well, yeah, Sharon.
Yeah, like they'd ever let you talk at a budget meeting. It isn't going to happen, but it looks real good on tape when they're babbling. It's a nice show,
Well, that's why I was wondering when I heard him say that. I thought, when does that happen?
They usually cut people off and say it's the end, or we'll talk about it later. It's just kind of interesting. Well, now we're shifting gears a little bit, and we're going to talk about, I'll just give you a brief overview of, they have to renew all the liquor licenses in December. And Raj is actually doing something again. I mean, for a while I thought his mouth didn't work, but now since things have changed, the new year, Raj and Kiefer are both motioning and seconding, and oh boy, they just got the place on fire. So I'm just going to show you one of them, but this is just give you a taste of the procedure. There's about 15 or 20 liquor licenses, and we're just going to show you one. So we'll talk on the other side.
Renewals, and we've done this a few times. So we're going to need a first and a second, and then a vote on each one of these. So whoever wants to grab the first or the second on
I'm gonna
this,
keep my streak then.
you're going to keep your streak
Yeah.
going. All right.
Motion to approve 2019-26 McGraw Incorporated 2020 liquor license renewal.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of this liquor license renewal signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No.
Motion approved.
There, and it goes on like this, but you notice it's the Cheech and Chong, the dynamic duo, though Raj proposes it, and Kiefer, so they're actually getting actively involved as best they can. I almost feel like you can almost see the strings above their heads, and Huber pulling, making a move, But that was I just wanted to give a flavor of that. Now we're going to be talking about a letter of intent. So let's go to the next clip and we'll talk on the other side.
Here, Mr. Dennis Kopp left us last month. Unfortunately, he decided and his family decided that it was time to leave Grant and do some downsizing. So that took place and he has left us. So the council has decided that we are going to consider an appointment to the vacant council seat. And we are going to do that next month. We were hoping to get letters of interest, resumes, whatever you want to call them, forwarded to the city clerk at city office. And then those will be looked at by the council and then discussed, and an appointment will be made in January. Kim, do you have anything to add to that?
I would just add that we will post the vacancy and that you are looking at letters of interest prior to the January meeting, and to submit those letters to the city perhaps by, I think, November 20th.
December 20th.
December 20th, yeah.
Do you prefer those via email or? U.S. mail? Do you have a
They can be dropped
preference?
off, they can be emailed, whatever they prefer.
Whatever they prefer. Okay, good. And then we'll have a good long time to take a look at those. Our meeting in January is not until the 7th, if memory serves. So we'll have a good long time to look at those and consider our applicants and even contact them with questions if so needed or desired by the council.
What's interesting is they're going to make their decision and then vote on it in January. Does that kind of sound like another violation of open meeting law?
Well, and the question I have is, have they established any criteria as to what they are using for the appointment process? Are they looking for individuals with a certain amount of background or how long they've lived in Grant, or is it just that it's somebody that they know is in conformance with their policies?
Well, I guess maybe it's which president they see under the table. I don't know. But I'm sure it's going to be some crony. If I would have to guess, I would say it would not surprise me to see Mr. Bob Tufty be appointed, because he's one of their henchmen, does the dirty work, does the legwork for them. So
and they're not even going to have the applicants come in and do an interview.
No.
Because many councils have the applicants who are interested in being appointed come before the council, and then the council has a slate of questions that they ask the applicants, and they ask each applicant the same questions, so then they can compare the answers, see what each candidate presents of themselves in those answers, and then choose from there. But they're not even going to do that.
Well, about 6 months ago, I did reapply when they had a vacancy on the Planning Commission. Okay? And they did interview people. Of course, I was the most experienced, and they put somebody on there that had no experience at all. Now we have another little brief clip. So, and it'll be interesting to discuss this. We're going to go back in history for this to talk on the other side. But
Here, I was over there, and now I'm moving here. So if you think that this chair was empty, you are correct.
Mayor and council members, if you think this hasn't happened before, it has, changing seats, yeah.
So amiable.
Yeah, it wasn't quite this amiable last time, but under city council rules, our chairs are selected, except for the mayor who sits in the middle of the council members. Chairs are selected by the council members depending on their seniority at this table. So seniority is the determining factor of which seat you sit in, and it is a choice matter, and John has chosen. The choice has been made. So,
you remember a few years ago, we had a little bit better fiasco when I was assaulted at a city council meeting, then refused to sit next to Mr. Huber. Now we're going to go to one last thing before we shift gears to the Matamidi school situation. It's about Sunnybrook. It's a lake that's south of County Road 12 and southeast of Jamaica. And there's a lake in there that's landlocked and it has no outlet. And the soil conditions are such, it's a silt loam like much of my farm is, and that doesn't perk down like if you were in the sand. So the last couple of years, there's been a contractor that went in there, put a pumping station in and pumped the water down. They put a 1,000-foot line because it's on the north end of Indian Hills Golf Club. And the gentleman that runs it doesn't want the three of the greens flooded, so he allows them to pump it and going into a swampy area that's got a sand base so the water drains down. And it's going in again next year, by the way. But last time we showed you a clip from the emergency response Washington County, and the last part of the clip was, well, if they can't get in there, we'll put a boat there so the residents can get in. Now, that's nice. That's very, very reassuring, you know. Hopefully they include some life jackets, but this is kind of a long clip, so we'll talk on the other side.
situation and the amount of water that we see in Grant in certain areas is very, very concerning. Some of the roads that we raised in the last couple of years are now underwater. We have been exploring our options as a city along with other governing authorities that have control over, this gets complicated, but they have actual control over the floodwaters themselves. The city could not go, for example, and put a pump in somewhere and move that water. Our main responsibility is to maintain
Not true.
access to properties. That means in this case, and I'm talking about Sunnybrook area, specifically 68th and Jocelyn Avenue North. What that means in this case is with the assistance and guidance of the appropriate authorities that are in charge of the floodwater, namely VBWD, Washington County Conservation District, with their assistance and guidance and permits in place, we are looking at raising those roads and raising them in the most efficient manner and raising those roads in order to guarantee access, or at least I shouldn't say guarantee because there is no guarantee when it comes to this kind of weather. There isn't one. To do the utmost that we can within reasonable limits to get access to these properties. And that's what we're looking at right now. Where are we in that process? We had several meetings with emergency management in Washington County, Mr. Doug Berglund, great guy, they do a good job there. We've met with Joe Lucas and John Hanson at BBWD. We've also had our own city engineer involved in these discussions. So at this point, what we are doing is, we also had the county highway department come in, and it was very nice, and they didn't charge us for this. They came in and they did some engineering studies of their own and determined what could be done to raise these roads, what their costs would be, just so that we had that. Obviously, those were, a little bit higher than we're normally used to paying for road work, but they were very, very helpful to start the process. So at this point, our engineer is looking at those plans. He is talking with our local contractor, our local road contractor, in terms of how he would do it and in terms of what those costs would be. Now, once those things come together, we have to identify culverts underneath these roads that we're dealing with. We have to identify whether or not we have right-of-ways underneath these. We cannot just go dump gravel on anyone's property without the proper right-of-ways. So we're identifying right-of-ways, we're identifying culverts, we're identifying whether or not we need to add culverts, okay, in order to equalize flow, because sometimes you can create a dam there. So we're looking at all these things, and once we have this information put together, then we'll set up another, call it a global meeting, with the same folks that I just talked about, VBWD, emergency management, our engineering staff. I'm sure the county will be there. I'm sure Mr. Myron, our county commissioner, will be there. And once we get all these people in the same room and we have this information, we can then make decisions in terms of how the road gets raised, how a road gets raised, whether or not there's going to be a permitting issue with VBWD. And I say that because every time floodwaters are diverted, whether a road comes up and acts as a dam and perhaps there's not enough culvert there, or whatever happens, whenever you change the water's path, there are downstream effects. So we need to plan for that as well as access to these neighborhoods. So, access to these neighborhoods is great, that's our responsibility, but if we're causing downstream effects that are deleterious and are hurting other people, that all needs to be taken into account. In terms of progress, we're moving very solidly toward it. Do I have a date for those meetings yet? No, I don't know when those are going to happen yet. We're moving solidly toward it, but I will say this, I don't think that there'll be any action in terms of construction action or actually heavy equipment out there until probably closer to the spring. And that's kind of the timeline that I'm seeing on that.
Let me point out the first falsehood. Right out of the box, he's fibbing, because last year, Valley Branch authorized a pumping situation where they went in and put in 2 pumps to pump the water from across the road. I believe it's Keats. It was going across the road. They put a pumping station, a 1,000-foot pipe along, as I mentioned before, Indian Hills Golf Club. And they authorized the permits and the pumping. So no, you don't have to involve everybody. All this water is within the Valley Branch Watershed District. I went to many meetings. We've talked to them. There was a contract for next spring to do more pumping, because one of the conditions, this has been the wettest year on record. We've had over 40 inches of rain, okay? And we're also at a record snowfall for November. We're over 20 inches. And so with the ground being 99% saturated, we're going to have a real problem this coming spring, because the ground's already saturated. There's no place for it to go. And not only that, the top thaws out, but the bottom doesn't. It takes a while for the frost to go out. So it can't sink in the ground, so it runs. And right now They pumped it last year. They took it out. It's still in place where they can put it in. The contract has been signed for Valley Branch. So all this BS about all these people and you can't do it is hogwash, because they've successfully done it at least 2 years in a row. The other thing, him babbling about gravel along the roadside, one of the problems with Keats is they have the road goes through a little wetland, but the city doesn't own the land. They've never received title to it. All they have is an easement through continuous use of 30 or 40 years. They went to widen the road and put guardrails up, and the landowner said, wait a minute, you don't own that, you're encroaching on my land. So there's only one guardrail up, like a half of the other projects they've done. By the way, speaking of guardrails, Mud Pile Lake, they were going to put a guardrail across that. Of course, nobody's went off that road since 1998. It's never been an issue, and they only had money for 2/3 of it, so the worst third is still open. But I mean, this is the way these clowns operate.
When talking about the schedule of meetings, because certainly if this is, the process has gone along as far as he's claiming it has, and that he's been involved as much as he claims he is, they certainly should have some idea of when the meetings are going to be that are planned for the future. And yet his quote is, "We are moving solidly forward." If you're moving solidly forward, more than likely you would have at least a timeline of tentative meeting times. And that you may not have the exact location or the time, but at least to say there's going to be a meeting in March, or to have some concept of what the plan is going to be, the next steps.
The bigger joke of the whole thing is, during the last 2 times that temporary pump has been installed, the mayor has never gotten involved. He never contacted Valley Branch Watershed. The only thing that happened when they had a contractor come in there and open up a berm to drain it, Valley Branch said, you better put it back because we say so. So what I'm saying is he's never been into this, and all of a sudden he sounds like he's in the thick of it, which is the biggest crock that came down the road. When they were flooding before, he did nothing. He didn't contact anybody. I was at Valley Branch Watershed with multiple meetings, went with a contractor, and they put in a temporary pumping system, and they pumped it down. But again, this guy's blowing smoke and waiting for your ears to start tickling. So it's just really a joke. You know, it's just unbelievable. They've got a horse and buggy approach to governing. People are demanding to have the roads fixed. Oh yeah, nobody requested anything. Well, guess what?
Well, and I think the point that you're bringing up is that yes, the roads need some maintenance, some roads need some repair, some roads need some reconstruction, but they haven't necessarily put together the right financial framework in order to accomplish that, knowing that they are not, the city of Grant is not set up like the city of North St. Paul or Maplewood or any other community where you've got nice little blocks where everything is organized in regular streets with curb and gutter, that's all been done already. I mean, the city of Grant has this mixture of, improved streets, dirt roads, county roads. Some of them are maintained by the city. You have, and then plus the fact that you have the requirement of the large lots, and that you can't have, you have to have the 5-acre minimum. Well, you can't just say, well, we're going to just do special assessments using lineal feet, because people can't afford to do road reassessments and improvements based upon that kind of a formula. Plus, that formula probably doesn't meet the constitutional requirements under the state law and under the Constitution of the state of Minnesota. And so your idea that they should be having as part of their budget a line item where, as part of their operational costs, just like they have a line item for grading the roads, they pay for somebody to grade the roads.
Well-
and that's a line item.
Well,
Well,
the-
they need to have a line item that is planning for the future of how to maintain the roads beyond just the road grading of the dirt roads.
Let me make 2 points. First of all, there was a line item, and they had a road fund, and they had several $100,000 in there back in 2002. When Carr became mayor, he got rid of it and lowered the taxes for 2 months. The other thing about the roads you have to
Oh, for
understand.
2 years?
What?
For 2 years?
No, he lowered it, yeah, just till he got rid of the $400,000
Right.
surplus. Then they're back to the 4%.
Right.
And in one of the other clips we had, we pay about $125 a year towards road maintenance. Well, let's delve into that. There's 50 miles of road in Grant that are city-owned. The other 50% of the roads are state and county. Okay, so that's 25 miles of gravel and 25 miles of asphalt. Well, you have to continually road grade and maintain gravel roads. You have to road grade them at least 3 times a year. Every so often, you have to put another top coat on. Every 7 to 10 years, they may actually do a seal coat. Well, you can only do that for so long. On my particular road, the idiots went out there and did a seal coat. Then they decided after the fact, come out with leaf blowers and patch the holes. So our road looks like it has the measles. But, you know, again, the people who live on gravel roads are getting most of the maintenance. The other people are getting next to nothing. And when this last big, we did a whole show on that about how they changed the road policy, sneakily I might add, and how they were going to bundle everything and do a major rebuild for $600,000 in one road, and then do an overlay and spread it among another 112 people, so the 10 people on the road wouldn't have to pay the full boat. Because, gee whiz, and who lived on that road that needed the major rebuild? The mayor and deputy mayor. They didn't want to pay anything. Now, Joliet is off the table. They're not going to do anything with it. It's just going to continue to get bad. There's more patching on that road than there is road. And again, the reef stock, the engineer we have, is call him Big Bucks McGee. I had McCusick. With the old engineer, we could have done it for $130,000. When they made the presentation of this little 2-mile section of road, they were saying it had to be rebuilt for $450,000, and 8 people would get to share that. Don't think so. Again, there's so many flaws from management to the engineer that at some point in time, when this changes, it's going to be kind of like, I forget, one of the suburbs out here, maybe it was Afton. The people that were on the board, the old guys kept saying, no, we're not, no, we're not. Then they finally got new people in there. Then they had to bond, and they asphalted darn near the whole area. You know what I'm saying?
Your point's well taken, in that if you don't have some long-range plan, the maintenance issues continue to build up. And then it gets to a point where a little Band-Aid isn't going to work. You have to do a total reconstruct, or you have to do a total real extensive road project plan. And is that something that the community can afford out of pocket? Probably not. So then they have to go into bonding. That's
well,
correct.
what's interesting is a number of years ago, about 6 years ago, 7, there was a short road that was like a cul-de-sac, and it needed to be redone, and they decided to turn it back into gravel. Well, to repave it would have been $100,000. It cost them $80,000 to turn it back into gravel. Now, does that make any sense? I mean, what these guys do are, I mean, they're Okies from Kanoki or something, because, you know, the roads don't fix themselves. They have about a 25-year life, and like that McCusick Road I was talking about, instead of spending the $130,000 to fix it, they've been spending $30,000 a year patching it. So now they got $150,000 into patching, and they could have had the road done, which would have lasted for 10 to 15 years.
Yes.
Again, very short-sighted, you know, penny wise and dollar foolish, and they want to keep the people down. No, we're not going to raise taxes. And why? You know, the downside of living in Grant is 98% of the people that live in Grant can't qualify for food stamps. I mean, it's not a poor community. So it's just ridiculous that they have this policy. But now we're shifting gears, and we're going to go to Montemita School District, as I understand, and you have some clips, and I have
Yes.
some information to add. It's going to be very interesting. Montemita is a sinking school district. The background on it is they had a population of 2,200 students. They decided that they wanted to maintain a school at 3,300 students, so they have open enrollment. Well, the problem with that is when you have an open enrollment, the state gives you $1,200. Well, every school district has levies, and so they have another $800 for the levy to get to the $2,000 to pay for the students. Well, the trouble is when you have open enrollment, when the kids come in, they only bring the $1,200. The other regular levy stays in their school district. So that means every student that comes in brings $1,200, but costs another $800. So what happens is you really have to raise taxes, and I think if you're looking, people in where I am looking in our tax bill, it's 55 cents out of every dollar goes for the school. It's the highest around.
Just to bring this home to our viewers is that when the open enrollment student comes in, sure, they bring some money with them, but that doesn't cover the entire cost of their being at that school. And so the difference then is borne by the school district, which ultimately is funded by the property taxpayers of that school district.
Absolutely.
So the school district, the residents of that school district are actually then subsidizing the education of students elsewhere. And of course, students from Montemita School District could easily also say, oh, I want to go through open enrollment to a different school district, and so it happens there too.
Not often.
But that's the issue, is that how many enrollment are coming in versus how many open enrollments are going out. And then that's where you then see then that differential and that gap, and whether or not if it stays balanced between the two. Because ideally, theoretically, you'd have as many open enrollments coming in as you would go out, and then it doesn't
The flaw
matter.
in that is, if you're in a school that has a class of 800 kids, what is your chance of getting on the 18-member football team? Okay, how about the school district that only has 300 kids per class? You've just more than doubled your chances of playing athletics. If you don't make the string at Stillwater, come to Montemita, you're going to ace somebody out. And it's not only for sports, we're talking music, band,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
The other thing is Montemita is famous for is their dubious decisions, okay? I was at a meeting about 3 years ago, and they had hired a homeless coordinator to help for the homeless people, okay, in the district. Well, come to find out there's three, and this was $60,000 a year plus benefits they were paying her. Well, if they would have taken that $60,000 and gave each one of those homeless people 20 grand, they wouldn't need a coordinator.
Well, now this issue that we're working up to with regard to the Montemita School District, I mean, what we're leading to is that there is a little town of Birchwood that is sandwiched in kind of between White Bear Lake and
Montemita,
and-
it's a real small
Yes.
little burg. It doesn't even have it has no commercial. It's just on the lake.
Yeah, and their population is about 850 people, and there's been some discussion in the city of Birchwood about what school district should they be a part of. Currently, they're part of the White Bear Lake School District, but there's a certain percentage of people in Birchwood that would like to be part of the Montemita School District. And so this issue is generating from the city council level. The school district of Montemita, of course, is not necessarily opposed, I don't think, of getting more students in their school district. I haven't heard anybody asking them particularly about it, but we went back and did a little research and found the August 2019 meeting of Birchwood, where the issue came up about what school district should the Birchwood students go to, and which school district should Birchwood be a part
That
of.
is I would like to put a survey out, and I would ask for the approval of the council to have a survey distributed in the water bill upcoming. And this is a topic that had reared its head back in 2017 and then stopped. And I know Randy was involved, and there were a number of residents involved, and it relates to redistricting the boundary of the school district. Logistically, just recognizing that all of Matamidi schools are nearer than the closest White Bear school, and it seems that a tremendous number of our residents have, in the past, when the opportunity was presented through open enrollment, they walked and chose a community school blocks away, not miles away.
Now, we attempted to find a copy of that survey so we could see what the questions actually were on the survey. That would be interesting to know. And it sounds like the survey was put together by residents of Birchwood, maybe even together with this city council person. But what we can say is that there were about 60 responses to this survey that was in the water bill. And of those responses, it was pretty evenly split between those that wanted to have Birchwood be part of the Matamidi School District and to move over and to have those district lines changed, and as opposed to those people who said, no, we want to stay in the White Bear Lake School District. Now, ironically, it also indicated that 49 students through open enrollment go to Matamidi School District, and 40 students go to White Bear Lake. So again, it's not a clear, overwhelming response either way, and yet this council member, when he was talking about that opportunity to open enroll, he said that there was a high predominance of open enrollment, and yet when you compare 49 to 40, I don't know that that actually meets that description.
Well,
so it's important to understand the statistics of what that survey said. It's not a clear-cut survey that the residents of Birchwood want to switch school districts.
Well, it's a student grab is what it is. Some people are gasping for air. I mean, I've got figures here that they're overlapping, yet they're over $93 million in debt in
that Matamidi
has.
is, right,
and
right.
They're bleeding cash.
Right, and seeing what this would do from the Matamidi School District point of view is that then they would have more households that they can collect revenue from.
It's a money grab, that's right.
And so the question is that from this council meeting, it sounds like the change of school district is generating from residents of Birchwood and not necessarily being generated from the Matamidi School District. So underlying all of this is are the politics that the school district is pushing certain Birchwood residents to do this.
Don't we have another clip from one of the council?
We do, so let's take a look.
Recently been peppered with folks asking about this, recognizing that this, and I believe it's probably the result of a very large ask by the school district for a bonding that is $350 million to facilitate construction that is largely not in our community. We're talking about a student population that 60% of which is north of the White Bear Center for the Arts. In our community, really, we could have kids riding blocks, not miles, and I think we have to explore it.
Councilmember Fleck is talking about the White Bear Lake School District and their supposed request for additional money through a bonding referendum, and that he is claiming that there's a large push of residents of Birchwood to move to the Matamidi School District because they don't want to have to pay for the White Bear Lake referendum, that they're running away from the White Bear Lake referendum. That's what he's saying. And so is that the case or not? Because would this changing the boundary happen in time for them to avoid paying in the White Bear Lake referendum if it passed?
One of the things I want to point out, the incorrect fact he said, why they have to go miles to White Bear. Excuse me, I taught at White Bear High School for 24 years. I drove through downtown Willerny, okay? The high school is not that much further at Matamidi than White Bear is. It might be, one might be a mile and a half away and the other one's 2 miles. So we're not talking a great distance. White Bear High School is on County Road E and McKnight. So the seniors wouldn't, there isn't that much of a difference, and most of them drive anyway. It's absolutely ridiculous. If those poor fools get in the Matamidi district, they're going to really find out what taxes are, because...
And that's correct. And that is a point that one of the council members does bring up. So we have another clip, so
Okay,
let's take a look.
If it were an overwhelming response, you know, it might be something that's worthwhile. Recognizing that Birchwood is a community that its only source of cash to operate is through residential real estate taxes, and I've heard folks discuss, and we'll get some, you know, some hard numbers on that, and estimates really, on what the values of our real estate would do. I've heard lakeshore lots, Matamidi versus Birchwood, $100,000 premium paid for that district.
So the next argument is that if Birchwood moves over to the Matamidi School District, because they're in a different school district, that their property values are going to increase as a result of being in a different school district. Okay, well, that is an argument, but where's the hard numbers on that? I don't know.
I don't know what this guy was smoking, but I'm sure he didn't buy it at a retail establishment in Minnesota. Let's put it that way. I'm familiar with some of the real estate prices in White Bear Lake, and believe me, it's not cheap. It's going to be a horse apiece, wherever White Bear Lake, if you have Lakeshore, you're talking big money any way you look at it. So yeah, there's some property values in Matamidi are going up, because finally they're tearing all those little houses down that were along the lake, and they're putting up McMansions, and that's where a lot of the value of real estate's coming from, because I remember they tore down about a 1,200 square foot Rambler right in the corner of 12 and 244, and they put up about a 5,000 square foot house. Well, yeah, the real estate values are going to go up.
But keep in mind, every time your taxable market value goes up on your property, guess what else goes up proportionately with that? And so it's important to know what the mill rate actually is for the community, because just because your property value went up, well, you know, that's one thing, but that also means your taxes go up as well.
Do we have another clip?
We do.
Here we're playing the clip.
And so I'm asking for permission to work with a number of folks in the community that have expressed interest in the past, 2 years ago, to make a survey up and send it out in the water bill.
So this is how the survey was generated at a city council meeting. So let's continue.
The other thing is I have friends that do live in Matamidi, and they say that their taxes are almost double as what we pay in Birchwood because of the school district. there's a good majority, a lot of people in this community that are retired that have a fixed income. And by going from White Bear to Matamita, I would increase, I figure my taxes will go up at least $1,300 to $1,500 a
So
year.
those are the numbers that we'd like to determine if those are real.
And so there is value to having a survey to find out what is the temperature for a particular topic in your community about an issue. But you have to, with that survey, you have to have the details and the information that's relevant so people can make good decisions when they're answering the survey. Now we have another clip. Let's take a look.
That based on what this current bonding situation with White Bear's ask of $326 million for bricks and mortar is going to raise my taxes over $500. I believe it's $23 a month, they say, for a $275,000, and that's not adding any value to your community. You know, that's not adding any value to your...
That's still cheaper than going to Matamita.
Yeah, but what if your house is worth $60K more, Kevin, because...
So then yours is gonna go up even a lot more in Matamita, and I know people in
Well, we
my
don't-
area don't want it.
Sounds to me like Councilmember Kevin understands the proportional relationship between the increase in your taxable market value and the increase in your property taxes. Now, there's one last clip where they make a comment about how Matamidi spends their money from their referendum.
Logistically, Kevin, if you just look logistically, you know, you look at the boundary line of Matamidi, on the west end, the only side that is a
Are they
carve-out
gonna be building a
is
skating
Birchwood.
rink?
Yeah.
So that's gonna cost them to go up even more.
Yeah, I don't know that. I mean, but, okay, so what, we want
So-
more information.
Well, no, but if you can, you know, the newsletter, we've always got one extra page. I usually use one single side now, no pictures. But if you can use one page, and if you want to put it on colored paper, we could probably do that, so it distinguishes itself.
So Councilmember Kevin asked, well, aren't they also building a skating rink? Haven't you, Mr. Loren Sederstrom, been talking about that skating rink?
Oh, yeah, they're up to 12 to 14 million. But let me go over some things.
So I just wanted to share with you that the issue of the skating rink came up in Birchwood.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me just go over a couple real quick things. In order for this to fly, you'd have to have 100% of the property owners sign and agree to annexation. It'd have to go approved by the county board. Both school districts would have to vote to approve the plan. Let's see. The nearest White Bear Public School is the same as our furthest Matamidi Public School. Okay. Students and staff ratios in Matamidi Public Schools are larger than the Washington County average. White Bear Lake has more programming for students. Residents don't want to accept liability for the Wildwood School, which is on a dump site. And Matamidi has a liberal cell phone use policy that allows middle and high school students to use their cell phones at school. And recently, 832 was financially downgraded by Standard & Poor's. The debt is below $93 million, and this impacts student experience. So definitely, Matamidi is in trouble. They have one school, O.H. Anderson, that has a capacity of 650, fire capacity. They have 686. So they're running, you know, there's 53 students have been pulled out of Wildwood Elementary because of nosebleeds and headaches. 2 teachers have had cancer, and of course there's not a cancer danger. I mean, Matamidi is waiting to explode. I would say in 5 years they're going to have to do something differently. They have Stillwater provides some special aid services and their school lunch program. So they're not even self-sufficient. And the decisions they make, they did a survey a number of years ago about, and what they came back and did is they gave all the administrators a raise. Because they thought
So in other words, to wrap up our program, and our conclusion and recommendation in this matter is that perhaps Birchwood should stay in the White Bear Lake School District because they'll have less headaches.
the other recommendation would be get rid of Montemedi, you could save $1 million or $2 million in administration. Already Stillwater does a significant portion, send the rest to White Bear Lake, and hey, it'd be good to go. You know, they're just very inefficient, spending $2-3 million in administration every year. And the decisions they make, like with that, for example, that coordinator for the homeless for $60,000 a year plus benefits. Hey, if they gave each one of the 3 homeless people 20 grand, it would have been taken care of with no benefits. So thank you for coming on and helping enlighten these people. There's so much that goes below the surface that most people don't see. Thank you for sharing the information. And come back next time and we'll show you what's happening in all around Grant and Montemedi and Birchwood.
Thank you.